Materials from trees, today on Hands-On.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's back to basics on this 10th anniversary series of Hands-On. Each show has a basic theme like patterns or letters, plus a basic how-to lesson on your favorite craft or craft material, like scrapbooking or clay or even wood. Each show also includes another basic, a painting lesson, from choosing paint to preparing your surface. At the end of the next 13 shows, you'll know everything about painting and be on your way to becoming an artist. So on each show, you can look forward to a basic theme, lots of projects, each with 5 steps and 5 ingredients. Keep basic supplies like scissors, markers, toothpicks, and rulers on hand. Remember, be creative and get back to basics with Hands-On. There are many products that come from trees, mainly paper and wood, and we feature both today. And along with these materials is our feature technique, collage. Collage is created by cutting or tearing materials and pasting them onto a painted or an unpainted surface. It can also be a work of art created by pasting all sorts of mismatched materials. Collage was initiated by Pablo Picasso in 1912. Our first collage is a letter tin using mostly paper. Then it's today's basic lesson where we feature wood. Then it's lesson 9 of our painting basics with Prudy. Today is finishing techniques. And finally, it's a different look at paper collage and a little bit of wood too. I'll be right back with collage. Our first project is a monogram tin with your initial on it. Let me tell you what you'll need. We start out with some glitter glue. We used an old tin. We have some jump rings, a chipboard letter, stickers, and a center or a circle, a clear circle that goes on top, some construction paper in 3 colors, paint pens, and a paint marker. Now for our basics, we've got our regular glue, a sponge brush, scissors, and a pencil. The first thing we want to do is we've added a little water in here, and then we're going to add some glue because we're going to make kind of a decoupage medium. And it's equal parts of glue and water. Now I've taken my tin, cleaned it out, and we're going to apply paper to the end. So what I've done is taken my paper and just torn off some little sheets. The best thing is to do irregular shaped pieces, and I've done them in black, pink, and beige. Then I'm going to take my sponge brush, dip into my glue and water mixture, and coat the entire top of the tin first. Then I'm going to pick up the pieces and layer them on the top. You can see I'm using my brush or my sponge brush to pick them up because it's already got a little adhesive on it. I'm going to go all the way across the top, and I'll keep adding. Remember, I can trim off the edges when I'm done. So once I get something that looks about what I'd like, let's get a couple more pieces on. We'll add one more pink there, beige up front. And you can add as many or take a little bit more time to add it on. I'm going to add a little bit of extra glue. And now I'm going to come back, and once this is really glued down, I'm going to glue each piece on. So that's the beginning of our box. Now our next step is to do our letter. And pretend this R is for your initial or choose your initial, and I'm going to take a paint marker. I'm going to squeeze it out a little on the side. And fill in the entire letter with the marker so it will have this neon green color. Now at this point, you can either sprinkle some glitter on top before it dries, or what we've done is we've let this dry so that we have that dark green color, and then we're going to take the glitter glue and go on top of it. So I'll add a little bit more on this so you can just see how it goes, and that will dry totally clear. You can just see how that has that glittery effect on the top. Now the next thing we want to do is to create our pendant. So I have a small circle here. I would punch a hole in the top, then take my letter sticker. This one happens to be G. And I'm going to pull that center out right there on the G. And let me get the other one out of the center on the top of the letter. And then as I mentioned before, there's an acrylic sticker that I'm putting on top. But before I do that, I'm also going to add a little bit more glitter underneath. And I'm going to slide that right on. As you can see, then the glitter is going to spread out and the glue is going to dry clear. That's that. Then the last step is to add a jump ring on the end so that I can attach it to my R here. All I need is a hole punch. I've got one right here, and I'm going to punch a hole in my R. Now remember, this is wet right now, so I'm going to punch it at the top just so you can see what I'm doing. Slide my hole punch around, slide that in, and punch my hole in the chipboard. Now I'll take that and my letter G, and then I'm going to attach it with the jump ring. And the jump ring would just go right through there, and that will hang on the front. Then the last step is to take my letter and glue it onto the front of my box. And I can use the regular glue, or I can use my glitter glue. And that will go right on the front of the box. Then we have one last surprise inside. If we look at our finished box here, we've added some special notes about R. She is radiant, she's rapid, real, reasonable, and ravishing. So you can put a special note about your friend and her name that begins with R. Today's basic lesson is all about wood. When you're choosing wood, you want to choose the highest quality you can, especially if you're going to put some time into the item that you're creating. One thing to look for is kiln dried. That'll mean that it has very low water content, so it's not going to warp. Also look for wood that doesn't have a lot of holes or knots, and look for wood that's very smooth like the examples that we have here. Now the first thing you want to do with your wood is to prep it. So I have a piece here, and the first thing that I've done is sand it very lightly to remove any imperfections, although as I said on this wood it's very smooth and starts out that way. Then you can use a tack cloth to remove any dust. And then lastly, you want to apply a sealer if you're going to be painting on the wood. If you're going to be staining, you don't need to apply a sealer. So let's talk about all the things that you can do with wood. It is so versatile. The first thing you can do is paint it. Most important thing is to use long strokes and to use as large a brush and a flat brush so that you get nice smooth strokes. There are also specialty paints, like paints that add texture or things like this. And now there are a few other examples to show you. The next example of things that you can do with wood is staining. You can use any kind of stain. And as I said, don't apply a sealer first. You want to apply the stain directly to your wood, or you can use an acrylic paint with an antiquing extender, which will make any acrylic into a stain. Same thing, always apply with long strokes. You can wipe off any excess, and then you can varnish. Here are a few examples. The next technique is stenciling. You can use any type of stencil. Lay it on top, add a piece of masking tape. The most important thing is you want to use a pouncing motion and use very little paint, because you can always add more paint, but you can't take paint away, and you don't want it to seep under your stencil. Here are some examples. Now our next technique is decoupage. Decoupage is used by making a mixture of either white glue and water or a decoupage medium. You can use it to apply tissue right to the bare wood or over paint. You can use it for wallpaper, scrapbook paper, any kind of item that you want to decoupage on. You can even decoupage three-dimensional items. And here's an example of that too. Now our next technique is wood pencils and rubber stamps. Now I've shown an example here of using a permanent ink with a rubber stamp to stamp onto bare wood and also to stamp onto color. Then I've added color pencils to color in the design, or here I've added glitter. It's such a versatile medium, you can just about use anything on wood. And here's a few other examples of that. Next, we have wood burning. And wood burning is something, of course, that you associate with wood. You can wood burn on a painted surface or on a plain surface. There are all different tips that come with the wood burning tool. Just make sure you have adult supervision. You're holding the tip to the wood. Your pressure, by how hard you press and how long you leave it, will determine how light or how dark the color is. So if I'm pressing hard, I'm going to get a nice thick line. and by leaving it there. And if I hold a lighter pressure and don't hold it as long, it will be a lighter impression. And we have some great examples to show you of that too. Then next, it's stickers and rub-ons. Stickers and rub-ons can come in just about any design, and they can make anyone look like a painter. They can be applied over painted wood or over plain wood. We have some wonderful examples to show you, especially of rub-ons. And lastly, there's markers. Markers, you can use water markers or permanent. Just remember that you want to seal your wood first, because if you don't, the markers will often run. The water-based markers will have a much softer look and have more of a tendency to run on your wood surface. Now the last thing is finishing. I have 3 finishes here. The first is gloss, then we have matte and satin. Obviously gloss will be nice and shiny, the matte will be a duller finish, and lastly satin, which is kind of in between. You want to use a polyurethane finish for something that you're going to be eating off of or using for food items, and you can use a regular varnish for just about everything else. And that is the basics of wood.
This lesson is all about finishing, a very important part to your end product. The first thing you need to do is check for graphite lines. If there are any on there, you can erase them with a kneaded eraser or even wipe them out with odorless turp. The next thing you want to do is see if you need any additional details. On this piece, I love the little routed edge, so I sanded the edge to make that architectural quality come out a little more. On this piece, the edge was antiqued with a little bit of burnt umber, as was the top. I spread the burnt umber or this burnt umber stain over the top, mopped it to soften it, and then, for an additional effect, I spattered it. This had burnt umber paint on it, and I went like this to get the spattering on it. Some people call those fly specks, and it all creates an illusion of an old piece. This piece had an embellishment on the top that really was kind of plain until I antiqued it with this dark red. I watered this down, put it on with a big brush, and then wiped the surface with paper towel so that the antiquing or the dark red stayed down in the crevices, and that certainly makes that show up, doesn't it? Once all of these little detail things are finished, you have to make a choice of what kind of varnish you're going to use. Varnish comes in a matte finish, which is totally no shine. It comes in a satin finish, which is a little bit of a shine, and I think that's probably the most popular, and it comes in a gloss. A gloss is super shiny, and I use it for special pieces, like this red box over here. If I want it to look like a lacquered box, I would give it that gloss shine. On a piece like this, it's a decorative piece, I would put on a couple coats of brush-on varnish first to get the level of varnish deep, and then finish it off with spray varnish, which totally smooths it out. On a little piece like this, a simple coat with a big brush using a satin varnish is plenty. This one is a serving piece, and so I'm going to use a product like this. It's a polyurethane. It makes it far more durable and can be wiped out easily after I'm finished using it each time. So there you have your lessons on finishing.
Our next project is a clipboard. What's really interesting about this is you can use any paper based on what sport or what activity you like, but we've also decorated the back because that's what everybody's going to see when you're carrying your clipboard. So let me tell you what you'll need. First of all, we've taken some decorative papers and we've chosen a soccer theme, stickers, we have some macrame cord and a pen, an ink pad and a stamp. Of course, we're using our wooden clipboard. We're using basic glue, a white glue. Then we've got a dark brown paint, but we also have something called a antiquing or staining medium. What you do is add this to any paint and it becomes a stain. Then our basic tools, we have some sandpaper, sponge brushes, and our scissors. So the first step that we want to do is to stain our wood. But before we stain it, we want to prep it. And to prep it, I've just taken a little scrap of styrofoam and put my sandpaper around it. And I'm just going to sand very, very lightly. You want to go all the way along the edges. Now, we're not going to seal this wood because we're putting a stain on, so it's not necessary. And you can see already how smooth the finish is and how you can see the beautiful grain coming through on the wood. So it takes very, very little prep. Then our next step is I've squeezed out some of the burnt umber brown paint and also this staining gel. And I'm going to mix those two together. And it's going to make the paint be a lot lighter so that it's not going to give as thick or as dark a finish. Now using nice long brush strokes, I'm going to just brush over my wood. And you can see I'm just leaving a very light coat. Now if you feel like you need a little bit more staining medium or a little more paint, you can add it in. But you want to continue to do a nice light coat all the way over. And then when you're done, you can also take a paper towel. Let me grab one. And just brush off any excess paint. Now if you want a little bit deeper color, you can just go over it one more time. Now you're going to do the front, the sides, and the back of the clipboard. Now set this one aside because I have one that's all stained. Now we're ready to do our decoupage. Now I've taken my paper and I've just torn it. You can see some of it has a white core because that's the center of the paper, which is fine. And I'm going to apply it to my stained clipboard. To do that, in this little container, I've mixed half of white glue with a little bit of water, and you just want it to be a little bit of a thinner consistency. And that's going to be used as a decoupage medium. I'm going to dip my sponge brush in, and I'm going to apply a coat first over pretty much the whole area that I'm going to be covering. That'll help my paper to stick down easier. So I'll put my first piece on and I'm going to put it in the center, use a little bit more glue to put it down. Then let's put this soccer ball in. And I'm going to put a little on the back too, just so I can figure out where I want to place it. Then I'm using one of the papers that I tore right from the edge. Put that down here. So I'm overlapping, and I'm going over each piece and adding more of the glue mixture over it so that it's stuck down on all the edges. Now I'm going to continue doing this, adding paper all the way across, overlapping as I go. And the most important thing is, don't worry, this glue is going to dry clear, but you want to put a lot down because you want a nice thick coat. Once I get all the papers down in the way that I want them, I'm also going to do the same to the back. But the other thing that I'm going to do is to take my glue mixture and use it as a varnish, and I'm going to varnish over the entire top. Like I said, don't worry, it's going to dry clear. So I'd put as many down as I'd like. Make sure everything is adhered really well. Don't be afraid to use too much of the adhesive. Set that one aside, and I've got one where I've got the design here. Now the next thing I wanted to do was add some rubber stamps. Remember, get a lot of ink on, place it down where you'd like it, press firmly down, and lift up. And you can put those wherever you'd like. Then I'm also going to add stickers. Star Player, Score. I can add something along here as well. When all of this is done, I'm going to put a whole nother coat of decoupage varnish over the entire surface. Then the last step is to take your pen, do the same process by putting glue, wrap some paper around it, add a string by tying it on, knot it, and knot it to the top. And then you're going to have, let's look at the finished clipboard. We have our pen attached, all of our designs on. This could be soccer or any other sport, and right next to it we've done another one for a Girl Scout troop. Except on this one we've used green acrylic paint and sponge stamps. This is our last project on symmetry. We're going to make a flower pot and the flowers to match. So here's what you'll need. I have some moss, some dry foam, I have a little wood container, construction paper, I'm using a glitter glue, 2 different kinds, some ivory paint, pony beads, and some little micro beads. And then I have wire and stem tape. And then have your basics on hand, which is your general white glue, and I have a pencil, wire cutters, and my scissors, and of course some sponge brushes. Now the first thing we want to do is to take our wood container and we're going to base coat it. So I've taken my ivory paint, just using nice long strokes, I'm going to cover it. You can also add a little bit of water, and I continue until this was all covered and nice and smooth. So I'll set that aside because I have one that's already painted. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to make a decoupage mixture. So I've taken my white glue, added it about equal parts water and white glue, and I'm going to brush that on the front. Now I'm brushing it on just a little bit earlier, and I'm going to show you in 1 second what I mean, so that I have a nice creamy coat. Now I'm going to put a flower design on the front. I have my pattern pieces here. I've cut these out and made patterns out of a heavy cardstock. But I'm going to do my smallest pieces first, which are my petals, which I've cut in red and purple. Then I've cut some in green for my leaves, and then a center. So I just laid out my pattern piece, lay it on a brighter color so you can see it. Took my pencil, traced around, and cut these out. So we've got those all pre-cut. Now I want to lay my design out. So I've let this set just a little bit because it'll make the glue a little bit tackier. Now it's important because we want to make a symmetrical design. So I'm going to start with my center circle and put that on first. Let me lay this down to make it easier. And remember, symmetrical designs are the same on each side. So what I put on one side, I'm going to also put on the other side. So I have a red petal on each side. I'm going to put a purple petal in the center, so it's exactly symmetrical. I'm going to put the two reds. And you can make this design any way you like, but what I'm trying to illustrate is just the idea that it's symmetrical. And as you can see, each side is the same. Then I'm going to tuck these leaves in, and I'm not going to make those totally symmetrical. So I'll tuck a green leaf in here. And let's tuck just one on this side, and actually they are symmetrical without that third leaf. Now I'm going to put another coat of that adhesive and water mixture, and I cover the entire front. Now the next thing I want to do is to cut out the handle. We continue until that was all totally covered. I've got one here that's all dry. I've laid this down and made a pattern and cut out a piece of yellow, and then I cut out a piece of blue about the size of here because I'm going to trim this down to use it to cut around. So I'm just going to cut all different shapes out. Oops, let me cut through. And I'm going to fill in the background with a mosaic. This can be any way you want. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let me cut the yellow one so you can see that. And I want to leave a little space in between each one so that it looks like mosaic or kind of like a pottery piece. So let's put the adhesive on the top first. And I'm going to lay these down one at a time, leaving a little bit of space. Now if I've got it over the edge, I can trim that off in the end. And I continue all the way around until I've got all of that down, and then I go and do the same by tucking those other pieces in here, by putting adhesive down and tucking them in. What I found is it's easier to maybe lay them out a little bit first, make sure I've got everything positioned the way I want, and then put another layer of glue down. Okay, now I want to make my flowers, and I said I already cut these pattern pieces, so I've cut my flowers. I'm going to layer them in 3 flowers. I'm going to take my glitter adhesive and put it on the outside edge, and I've just glued the flowers together, and you can do these in any color you'd like. Then I'm going to take the thicker glue and squeeze that out on the center in kind of a lot, lay out one bead in the center, and then sprinkle the other beads around. And the final step is to wrap some stem tape around a piece of wire. I've also cut out some leaves and slide those in. Now all the pattern pieces and the instructions are on the website. I'm just winding that around Our last step was to just add some foam in the center and a little bit of moss to make it just like a real plant. It's kind of interesting to know that it all began with a tree. The trees are cut down, lumber goes to the mill, and then it's finished, or the pulp is ground and made into paper. For our next show, we introduce a new concept, symmetry. Have you heard that term before? Tune in and find out how it's used in art on Hands On.
Projects and ideas for today's show are available on the web at craftsforkids.com. This show is number 1009. Hands On is sponsored in part by Elmer's Products, Inc., manufacturers of a variety of adhesives, arts and crafts, and office products for use at home, school, or business for over 60 years. www.elmers.com.